this is Alex from the Siebel Hub. In this demonstration, we are going to install Smart Answer. So I've extracted the installers from the 7 of 10 zip file that you download from Oracle support. And you have to install the dependencies first. So go to the dependencies folder, and there you find the JRE installer. I checked on my machine, there's already a recent JRE, so I consider that done. And then there's a Python installer, and I run this as the second installer. Make sure to run it as administrator, and then go for customize installation. Just keep the defaults here. And click next. And here we install for all users, avoiding trouble when you install it just for the current user. There's all sorts of permissions and stuff on the path. Also add Python to environment variables, so it's available for all users just on the command line. And just for transparency, I'll change the install location to a much shorter path name, easy to recognize. So hit install. Let's speed this up a little bit as we wait for the installation to finish. There's a handy disable path length limit button that goes away when you click it, and that's it. Next we take care of that PY Win32 flashback to Windows 2000 or whatever. So it's a simple installer that finds the Python directory and then installs itself. It's a plugin for Python, more or less, in layman's terms, so that should be no issue. Make sure to run it as administrator as well. And now the final dependency, the Postgres database. Again, run the installer as administrator. And in the wizard, the first page asks for the directory where to put the Postgres database. So let's make that an easy to remember one. Okay. Then leaving all these components, leaving this as default, entering a password that you document well for the Postgres superuser. The port is just fine, default locale, and that's it. So all that is needed for the installer to run. And it's fairly quick, so we're speeding this up a little bit. But gets the job done in a few minutes. And we don't need that stack builder thingy, so leave it out and finish. So that should have given us a service. So let's check out the services on that machine. There should be a Postgres database service. It's set to automatic by default and it's running, indicating good health. Also, you might want to do other checks, especially if Python is available on the command line. So as in elevated command prompt as administrator, go to that installation folder, type Python. Well, you get the Python prompt, so Python is correctly installed. So now you can run the Smart Answer installer proper. So Python was just a test, but now we find that installer, which is called install.py. So you, from an elevated command prompt, you type Python install py. And there you go. And that prompts you for the installer language, keeping English here. And now you have 4 options. and we pick the first one, which is configure and installation of a Smart Answer server. Next here, that's the Corpus entry languages. So you have to specify that at installation time. We choose English, French, and German here, the possible languages for the Corpus. Then we need a installation location. So I'll quickly create a Smart Answer folder here that will host all my Smart Answer software. So it will create a subdirectory itself. Then it's the master server that we install on the local host, should be fine. Designated as a master. No alternate configuration right now. And also no SMTP configuration. So skipping that. And now it's a database pointing to the Siebel database that you use it. In my case, it's on the same machine, but yours might be very different here. Make sure you use the Siebel table owner user or the table owner user if it's not Siebel. So because that will be used in the SQL sent by Smart Answer. It seems to validate it. Now need to point to the Postgres installation. We've done that. So here's our folder and click Finish. Okay, that will take a few minutes. And speeding this up a little bit so installation has finished, brings us back to the start and we can quit here. Yes. So checking the services, there should be a new service now, the Smart Answer server. The master node is running and set to automatic by default. So if you have problems here, check your path variables. And we do that right now. We don't have any problem, so we're good because we installed Python with the path option and for all users. If you have a different Python situation, then you might find some strange errors when starting the Smart Answer server. So make sure that these Python directories are in your path, which the installer did for us. Good. We're good here. Just checking. Okay, can get out of here. So the next part, we'll take a look at Bookshelf. So most of this, what we've seen so far, except the dependencies, is in Bookshelf in the Smart Answer Guide. And the Smart Answer Guide also tells us the command line options we have to do after installation for initial setup. So I'll just copy these to my machine as the machine is not on the internet. And so these are the steps. So there's a command admin Python script that is available as part of the Smart Answer server directory. So let's go there. So that is the directory the installer created. So you go Python cmd_admin py, type help first. So you see it's working and gives you all the command options that you have for this little utility, and Bookshelf uses some of those. So the first one is actually help, and the second one is the test option. So Python cmd_admin.py test, and that should come back with a success message. It says in Bookshelf, if that doesn't work out, you actually better call support. That's funny. All tests passed here, so we don't have to call support. And the next command documented is to create a administrator user. So we can call it SA-admin as in Bookshelf or any other name using the create user option, and that will prompt you for the password and confirmation of that password for the new user account. We will use that user account to log in from the Smart Answer administration tool. So make sure you document that well. And now we will use that new user to create the corpus. So you can have multiple corpuses. KB, uppercase KB, is kind of a default name, as we will see, because there's already a catalog and database with this name, so it's a good starting point. It prompts for the user and password, so you use the user account that you just created to create that corpus. More on that in a little bit. And you also use that new user account to delete the original admin user account as instructed by Bookshelf. So there's no security issue there, because now you have a custom admin user. Again, you have to authenticate using that custom admin user. All right, so these steps are dutifully finished. And now it's time to follow Bookshelf and install the Smart Answer administration tool. You can do on any machine. We install on the same machine, and you can use the install.properties file from the server installation to load most of the parameters. It's pretty handy. So back to the installation folder and run the install.py script. That's the installer language. And now we press the admin tool button. So this prompts for that configuration file, which the previous server installer has already created. So navigate to the folder for Smart Answer Server and pick the file, install.properties. Okay, load file. And off we go. There's just a few things it wants to know. The folder where to install itself in another subdirectory, choosing the same Smart Answer folder here, and which server to connect to. That will be in a default file. You can change that later. Using the username that you have just created before. The installation is pretty quick. It's basically copying files. And that's it. So we'll use that admin tool later. First, we follow the steps in Bookshelf again for installing the adapter itself. So the adapter comes in the form of a DLL file that you have to copy to the Siebel server and some other settings in text and XML files. So all this is in Bookshelf, following it to the letter here. So there's an SA adapter DLL file in Smart Answer Server Siebel _ DLL. So just the only file there is. So copy that and copy that on every Siebel server where you have the Smart Answer component, or just for safe measure, copy it on every Siebel server that you have. Doesn't hurt if it lies there in the bin folder. And now you have to create a sa_connector_config.txt file inside the Siebel server Smart Answer directory that already exists. And in addition to that XML file, you need to manually create that text file. And in that file, you have to put in your knowledge base names and the hosts that support that knowledge name. So we are just copying the first two lines literally and replacing the host name with the real name with single machine scenario. It can be localhost, and KB, that's the knowledge base or that we are going to use. So if you have multiple knowledge bases, you can basically map them to machines here. So, and then there's an sa_config XML file. We have seen that already. You need to edit that because it has dummies. So need to point to the correct bin, correct location of the adapter DLL file. Okay, that's a little bit too much. Sorry. So the full path to the SA adapter DLL file, Sieb server bin. And there's also a file system pointer, because at some situation it will write to the file system. I'm using the hard path here. Save that XML file. Okay, I spotted that XML file in the bin folder too. So just for safety, not sure if it's necessary, but can't hurt. Copy the sa-config XML to Sieb server bin, where it also resides by default. So I'm not sure about that, but keeping it in sync is probably a good idea. Then next step, a environment variable needs to be created that contains the path to sa-connector config.txt. So go to environment variables, new system variable with exactly that name, copy paste job here, and also the directory, best if it's copy paste. So the directory where the sa-connector config text file resides. Okay. Double check, yeah. And then it's log out and log in and restart the Siebel server. I chose to just restart the entire machine here. And I'm back. So now there's a nice note about the meta server config file in the Smart Answer server scripts, which can contain, you don't have to do it actually, but you can use these two parameters, Siebel query catalog and Siebel query categories, to influence the SQL issued to the Siebel database to pull the categories of the catalog. So Smart Answer works on the basis of categories and catalogs. And let's do this. So if you don't find the meta server config, you find the meta server 1 and 2 for the master and alternate server. So I do it for the first one. I only have a master server, and there's a SiebelDB section in that file. So this is where those two parameters can go. You don't have to put them here, but when you put them here, make sure that you replace the DB name placeholder with the correct table owner. So Siebel in my case. And you see the question mark has to stay. It's a bind variable. But you can, for example, modify the SQL to just honor the active flag column, making this an ANDed where clause. So make sure you test that first, maybe in SQL Plus. So you have the correct SQL. Otherwise you get errors when you run the functionality behind using that. Okay, so it's just pointing out that feature. You can't leave these two parameters completely out of that file. It will still work because it just has a default behavior. Now time to go to the Siebel Server Manager or similar and make sure you enable the Communication Management component group, including Smart Answer Manager. So we assign and enable that to one or more servers in our enterprise. So doing just that right now. Okay, missing the server still. So assign component group com mgmt to server 01 is my server name, So assigned successfully and enabled. Of course, you can do this by clicks in SMC or the server configuration views. Server manager is handy enough. And of course, you have to restart the server. So I've restarted my server and checked that Smart Answer Manager is actually online. If you use KB, the KB standard knowledge base, that works because KB is the kind of default value for Smart Answer. If you use a different knowledge base name, you have to enter this parameter here, the parameter called KB name, the alias or knowledge base name. It's also documented in the bookshelf guide. There's also a list of additional parameters, which there's actually only one additional parameter on the component that is not deprecated, the maximum number of categories. And this cat MGR is not a parameter, it's a log level, an event log level that you can set to 1 to 5 to get a log file, but it's not a parameter. So there's only one parameter you really want to check, the default value being 4. So you can set the maximum number of categories to pull, to actually return, sorry, not to pull, to return as a result of the text categorization. So let's check it out real quick. Let's go to the server configuration screen for a change. And for example, set the cat MGR event to 5 and the maximum number of categories parameter to a value that you like. I'm fine with the value of 4 that is already here. Now, while in the Siebel application, go to Administration Catalog and locate that KB catalog. It should be seed data. And being seed data, it's managed by Oracle, so you can create your own catalogs. But let's check out this catalog a little bit and maybe tweak it for a first test. So this is just a first light test. We want to see if the Smart Answer functionality is really working. So here, your mileage will be very different, but I'm using the standard KB catalog. It has all these strange categories like names of people, David Palmer, with a lot of subcategories. I'm going to delete them. I'm also going to deactivate some of them. Remember that active flag I used in the SQL. So all these name categories I don't find quite helpful here. It's just confusing. So yeah, I'm deleting them. So here's the final category count, and being catalog categories, they are nested. So you can see what's underneath. Like there's a monitor category on the desktop. And for each category later, your administrators will assign resolution items, for example, if used with the service functionality of Smart Answer, or response templates if used with the email response functionality. So here, well, there's a sample database. There's not really anything useful here, but I believe not. So let's leave it out for now. So this is the work you have to do later on to populate all this information. So now, with a catalog that is useful for a first test, we run the admin bat file in the Smart Answer admin folder that runs the administration tool. So it prompts you to log in using the password of the user you created earlier. So that's the first login to the Smart Answer administration tool, and it says the server is running, so that's good. So there's a lot of documentation in the Smart Answer guide. The dashboard is useless right now. There's no data. The corpus, we have to make sure we have at least a test corpus. So there's 0 entries in the corpus. As we can see, you can manually create entries or you can import them. So in the category tab, there's no categories. We have the catalog in Siebel, so you click pull categories from Siebel on the overview tab and confirm. So this is where it triggers the SQL and finds the KB catalog and pulls all the categories. So now you see 22 categories loaded. You can view, you can have a tree view, and you can have a list view. So all these categories are now loaded into that Postgres database, basically. So kind of a synchronization feature. You can also synchronize from the Siebel catalog administration view, by the way. But it's just, well, push from Siebel or pull from Siebel. It's not writing back anything you do here. So it's a single direction. So in the list view, you have more details. There are no corpus entries associated with the categories yet. So we'll take care of that in a moment. So let's go back to the corpus. And you can manually add corpus entries like so, clicking add. The language will be detected automatically. Remember those languages you support at installation time. So you type basically an email detecting the language works. So that's one piece of functionality. And then you associate one of the categories or more, one or more categories, and save that. So that's one corpus entry. And that's far from enough. You need, well, for a good corpus, you need, sometimes hundreds of entries for each category, depending on your complexity. So you basically want to import that. So I've created a simple CSV file, 3 columns, categories, subject, and message. Enter the categories, a subject, and a message for 2 categories, as you can see, covering 2 categories. And in the corpus tab, you can run an import, give it a name, just any name. Open that CSV file you have prepared and start import. So it loads 14 entries. Okay, so now my corpus has 14 entries. And notice one thing, when you import that and you have multiple languages, you get the detected language appended to the category name. Now it's a slight problem, it adds these categories, that's fine, but we don't have a match in the Siebel database for those. That's the problem. So we need to create those categories in the Siebel database with like RAM-English or monitor-English being children of the English category. For multiple languages, corpuses, you need basically, for each language, you need a parent category and then child categories. So we have to adjust here a little bit. However, you can start going to knowledge base and build the knowledge base. It's actually creating the model and then run a quick test. So this is all not unrelated to Siebel really. It's just testing the functionality. So let's enter a example email subject, like my monitor doesn't work, and run the query. And it should come back with a decent confidence per category, like 94% confident that this is about monitors, which is good. There's a threshold thingy, which is for email response. So the default threshold is 1, like 100%. That's a lot. You can set it lower, but you have to actually set it in the Siebel catalog. But if you want to play around with this, you can change that threshold here, like to 0.9. Save it. It will be overwritten once you synchronize from Siebel, so you have to be aware of that. Then build your knowledge base again. And that's good when you have a small corpus, because the build is just a few seconds. Then query again. Okay, now we have above threshold. Because the threshold is now 0.9 or 90%, and we have 98% confidence that it's about a monitor. So in the Siebel categories, we now must add that English parent category. And that's, again, that's for multi-language corpuses. And then add these subcategories, monitor English, and you would have to repeat that for other languages too. That's because the import creates those. I've synchronized those already. Before I created them in Siebel, so you will see what happened. Let's make that right. Okay, so now we have the correct structure in the categories listing, matching categories. And the D in front of the category name means that I have synchronized and the categories in Siebel did not exist. Like D is for deleted. So I'm now using the Smart Answer Synchronize button on the catalog, but yeah, having a hard time because I did it wrong. So I tried to rename it, but that doesn't work. Yeah. So, okay, what do I do? I'll just go and delete them. So demonstrating the functionality, you can delete a category from Smart Answer. Basically, imagine it's in a Postgres database. And now I press synchronize in Siebel again. Smart Answer synchronize. And going back and forth a little bit. Yeah, there it is. Now we have them synchronized, but they're no longer associated with corpus entries. So the corpus entries I imported are without categories. Not a problem. I have an import file, so I delete the entire corpus and import it again. And that imports those 14 test entries I have. And now you see the categories are associated with entries with the default threshold of 0, by the way, because there's no setting in Siebel, so that's 0. So let's change that. Again, if you change it here and synchronize from Siebel, it will be overwritten. So best to enter that in Siebel, see that later. That threshold is only important if you have email response. So want an automated response when a threshold is, when you're over a threshold. So now rebuild the knowledge base and run your test queries. So still get some results. So the monitor English, that's the one where it's really confident in that example. Okay, so this is a bit lengthy, but this is how you like import a test corpus, because you need something. And later on you will have a lot more. There must be a Smart Answer directory, by the way, in the file system and an export directory, because otherwise the Smart Answer Synchronize button will not work. So you need to create those manually. You notice the September 27 name from CData is just used as the XML file name here. So that's one prerequisite you have to add to your to-do list. Create that file system folders in case you want to use that button. And now let's look into the categories. So here's the threshold field. And you set it to a percentage, like 90%. And let's say 80 for RAM English. And you synchronize again, and you will notice after going to another tab and going back, that this is now synchronized from the Siebel database to the Smart Answer database. You see those 0.9, 90%. You can also set a schedule to rebuild your knowledge base on a daily basis. So every 24 hours, you enter the time, click set. rebuilding it right now again, just to be able to test, run a quick query for testing, see everything's working. And now the final test in Siebel, we can take a look at the email response analyze message workflow process, where the Smart Answer Client Business Service categorize text method is used. The input is a bit complex, as you need a child property set called event fields, or the type of that property set. But I put that together in the business service simulator. So categorize text of Smart Answer Client. You create that event fields child property set. Literally imitate what's in the workflow. So email normalized, subject, enter some test data, email body. So that's the child property set. And we want to know if really you can call it from Siebel, right, in a workflow or somewhere else. So the character set I don't need here, but you need a Smart Answer project name. SA email response is one of the seed projects. There are Smart Answer profiles or projects. Let's delete those test records below and run it. So you shouldn't get any errors, but you should get a child property set back with the list of matching categories for your text. So there you get a row ID and a confidence score, 98%. And that row ID is the row ID of a category. So that's how it works. So of course you can verify. You don't see the name, but running a quick query, yeah, that's the monitor English category. So I sent text about the monitor and I got the row ID of a matching category back. So that concludes the demo. It was all about the installation of Smart Answer and the first test. For good measure, check out the log files. If you set the log level to 5 of catmgr, categorization manager, you see those values coming in the input property set as a child, and you also see the adapter DLL playing well along, finding a server, and eventually returning those categories. Funny enough, you see the names here because the row IDs are looked up by the business service.